The last time Syracuse football won on the road at Pittsburgh was nearly a quarter century ago. And on a Thursday night, the lights were too bright. Syracuse football was not ready for the party they were walking into at Acrisure Stadium. A night that Kyle McCord will want to erase from his memory right now. 5 interceptions, 3 pick six, and Syracuse falls 41-13 at number 19 Pittsburgh. Here to break it all down, all the lows, it's Orange Press Pass, and it starts right now. Glad to have you with us here on Orange Press Pass as we move into Friday morning on the East Coast. Andrew Selover, Gino Antimarino, Griffin, Marcy, 41-13, all Pitt from the get-go. Guys, your first thoughts?
I don't even know where to start, Griffin. This was a disaster from the moment it started. Syracuse defense had a pretty good start to this game. Pitt went 3 and out, but the offense just couldn't really find its momentum in this game, Griffin. There was one play in particular. Syracuse had it on second down. They threw a pass to Emmanuel Ross, had a 15-yard pickup. It was a big time in the second quarter. And you know how Syracuse responds after that? McCord throws an incomplete pass followed by a 15-yard sack. So it just seemed like the Syracuse offense couldn't really get going.
Well, it was miserable from start to finish. There's nothing you could do about that. When you continue to just kill yourself and make these mistakes over and over again, you're simply not going to overcome the mistakes that you've made today. You had 5 interceptions from Kyle McCord, 3 of them being a pick six. You're not going to win football games like that. It really doesn't matter how the defense did because, like you mentioned, they started off coming out real strong. I mean, he did 3 and out right away, and then just having turnover after turnover, you can't overcome that.
So Syracuse, you mentioned the turnovers. Let's check out the turnovers as we head into the highlights from tonight's loss at Pittsburgh. The turnovers started right away at Acrisure Stadium. After a 3 and out after the first kickoff to Pittsburgh, the Orange would get the football, and Kyle McCord, well, a nightmare start as he throws to Rasheem Biles. That's the wrong team, Kyle. 35 yards to the house. That's how the scoring starts just over 2 minutes into the game. Next drive for Syracuse. Yep, he did it again. How in the world, Gino, does that end up in Brandon George's arms?
I can tell you, Andrew, this Pitt linebackers, they're called the Sharks, and they live up to the name, swarming.
Syracuse's defense again stands tall, forces a 49-yard field goal from Ben Sauls. And finally, Kyle McCord links up with Aronde Gadsden. Tries to go back to the well, Griffin. One too many times to the well. Look at Kyle Lewis run.
Absolutely, the disguised blitz there fooled Kyle McCord perfectly, and yet another touchdown from the Pitt defense.
So 2 pick sixes puts up Pitt 17-0 the score. Still 6 minutes left in that first quarter. Kyle McCord on 4th down. Syracuse rolling the dice early. They had to. Jackson Meeks gets the first down. But then McCord, another 4th down. Here's the best chance to score of the half and off the fingertips. That kind of night, Gino.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned it. The DBs, the linebackers played really well.
Feels like we never called Eli Holstein's name because it was all defense for Pitt. But he locates Sincere Lee for the touchdown, and then Kyle McCord forces the issue late in that first half, Griffin.
It was just trying to do too much on a play like that there. Just throw it in the dirt and call it a day, but make a big mistake there.
So the Orange, that took all the momentum out of their sails as if they had any before the halftime break. Had a chance to get back in it maybe, and they couldn't. Get the ball to start the second half, down by 31. Orange scored, but they took 10 minutes off the clock, Gino.
Just way too much time, Andrew. You got to come back in a big way, and taking the time off the clock won't do it.
4 first half interceptions. How about one more for good measure in the second half? Philip O'Brien picks off Kyle McCord. That's number 5. Tying a Syracuse record, not the record you want to put your name next to. Eli Holstein's second passing touchdown of the night to Raphael Williams. 38-6 Pitt, and Ben Sauls is just good at kicking the football, Gino.
Better call Sauls. That's what they said on the broadcast, so I guess that's a good way to say it.
Good to see Griffin here. Freshman Emmanuel Ross stepping up for Syracuse, but too little too late.
In games like this, it's just about getting your young guys some reps, and that's what they did today. Started to see any bright spots that you could.
A little deja vu as that finds the end zone from Dan Villari. He was the quarterback last time these two teams played a year ago at Yankee Stadium. How about the play calling here tonight? 29 runs, 64 passes. You like it, Griffin?
No, that is absolutely ridiculous. There's no reason Kyle McCord should be throwing the ball 64 times in one game, let alone on a time when he threw 5 interceptions. What gives you that confidence to continue to be dropping back with McCord like that?
Absolutely, Griffin. And it took several minutes before Syracuse even ran the first run play. It was a lot of passing, and Syracuse needed to just regroup and find more than just one dimension to winning this game.
So the Orange offense struggling all night. Kyle McCord struggling all night. As we head back to Acrisure Stadium, the seats are yellow, and Sam Corcoran has found his way onto the field at the home of both the Steelers and Pitt football. Sam, thanks for joining us. I want to start with Kyle McCord. What did he have to say after a 5-interception night tonight?
Yeah, Andrew, definitely a brutal night for Kyle McCord, but at the end of the day, him and Fran Brown both had their chins up high. It was a little interesting to hear. McCord said that this was the worst game of his career. There's no doubt about it. And both Fran Brown and McCord alluded to that the Pitt defense, they just made plays throughout the game, gave them some different looks. So a little difficult all in all. But the big mojo I got from Fran Brown, Kyle McCord, and Marlon Wax also spoke. Their chins are held up high. They know Syracuse has done very poorly in the second half of the season. They're not going to let that happen again. They want to win. Unfortunately, a big loss tonight against a ranked Pitt team. But guess what? They're coming back home. 3 more home games in November. Their chins are held up high. Lots of optimism going forward despite a brutal night tonight.
Sam, good to see you, man. You look good. I hope my hometown's treating you right. But, you know, we saw the game, and we saw Kyle McCord struggling. We saw Coach Fran Brown come over and kind of get in his head and try and resettle him. Obviously, you mentioned the chins up attitude. What did you see on the sidelines? Was there any sort of bad posture from any of the players? Was there disappointment? What did you see?
Gino, first of all, great to be a Yinzer for the day here in the Steel City. But you look at the sidelines, they were pretty confident and optimistic throughout the game. That's one thing that Fran Brown was talking about after the game. He had a lot of confidence in Kyle McCord throughout the game, hence why he kept him in there. McCord had his chin up. Marlo Wax had his chin up, like I mentioned. And overall, there wasn't much drama going on the sidelines, despite the injuries, despite the poor play. Just a lot of confidence instilled in this team by Fran Brown. Yeah, he gave a few pep talks to Kyle McCord, probably had a few words to say. We're never going to know what's said at the end of the day, but still, this team came to the field and had confidence throughout the game. Fran Brown wasn't ready to give up the game until the 3-minute mark in the fourth quarter. So very late in the game when the game, well, you look at the score line, it looked like the game was over at that point. So a lot of confidence on the sidelines. Didn't seem like there was too much drama going on, but body language still positive, especially after the game.
Well, Sam, you talked about Kyle McCord, obviously not a great day for him, but to me something that stuck out was the receivers really struggling to get any sort of separation from those Pitt cornerbacks throughout the day, and it was really disrupting the offense as a whole. Is there anything you saw that the Pitt defensive backs were doing so well out there to stop those receivers?
You know, Griffin, like Fran Brown said, a lot of just playmaking from these defensive backs, a lot of different looks. They just hopped on these routes a lot better, and 5 interceptions today says a lot about that. McCord had a better second half. You saw that in the stats and everything, but at the end of the day, these Pitt defensive backs just jumped on McCord. Also mentioned the linebackers as well, just jumping the routes, doing everything they can. Not to mention, though, the receivers didn't have a good day in general. We had a few drop passes here and there. The 3rd interception, I believe it was from McCord, went off like 4 guys, so you got to make sure you catch those balls at the end of the day. Put some stick-em on those gloves or something. The cornerbacks for Pitt, the secondary, had a career day for everyone involved. And the receivers, they got to step their game up next time. But Virginia Tech coming into the Dome, little bit of rest on a long week. Again, like I said, the big mantra from Fran Brown, chins held up high. That's the goal for Syracuse against Virginia Tech next week.
Well, Sam, it's not easy to keep the chins up high after that demolishing defeat on the road at Pitt. I'm sure you'll get some Primanti brothers after this game. Hope the airlines keep you good company on the way home. Thanks for joining us here on Orange Press Pass. When we return here to OPP, we'll break down more what happened, what went wrong tonight for Syracuse. Gino, Griffin go into the X's and O's on where the 'Cuse came up short at Pitt.
1 in 3 adults has pre-diabetes. That means it could be you, your favorite brother, your other brother, you, your football buddy, your football buddy, you, your plumber,
Breathe right into your foot.
your plumber's masseuse,
Yes.
you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back here on OPP, Andrew Selover, Gino Antimarino, and Griffin Marcy. Glad to have you with us. Syracuse, tough night to be the Orange guys. Falling big time on the road at Pittsburgh. Let's try and find out where this went wrong for the Orange. And it clearly went wrong from the start to the finish. I know we'll get to the turnovers in a minute, but let's talk about the offensive line play, because I don't think it's fair to squarely put all the blame on Mr. McCord's shoulders. He was under pressure all night long. 8 quarterback hurries, 4 sacks by that Pitt defensive front. Syracuse's offensive line felt like they were playing out of their league, Gino.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, you hit the nail on the head. And Griffin, this was just unacceptable. Obviously, you go on the road into Pittsburgh. It's a loud environment. They want the win. And so Syracuse just really struggled to find its rhythm on offense. They were getting pressured, like Andrew was saying. And yes, Pittsburgh just did a good job of breaking through. 2 sacks for a loss of 30 in the first half alone. And it just seemed like time and time again, McCord just didn't have any room to breathe, Griffin.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned that they seemed like they were outmatched, and that's because they were Pitt's one of the best rushing teams in the country. They averaged 3 sacks a game, top 15 in the country, and to me it was consistently putting your offense in bad positions. A lot of the time it was 3rd and long because you're not picking up any yards on 1st and 2nd down. You need to be more productive on those early downs to give your team a chance of success.
And again, I ask you the question, Griffin, of play calling, because if your offensive line can't block, how can you run the football? 6 rushing yards all night. What are you supposed to do if you're Jeff Nixon?
I agree with you there, but it's about getting those quick passes, and rather than these long shots downfield, the slot fades to Amari Hatcher up the seam, and instead of stuff like the quick out routes to Trevor Pena, just getting you started a little bit more right away at this drive. So maybe you pick up 2 yards on 1st down, but that's better than losing yards or not getting any completions. Just picking up early down yardage so you're not just way behind the sticks consistently.
And Andrew, I also want to say, heading into this game, Pittsburgh was the 4th worst passing defense in the ACC, giving up 240 yards per game. Yeah. The fact that they still couldn't get off good passes because the rush was so talented and just got through, I mean, that speaks volumes about this Pitt team.
And this is a Pitt team that had been known a little bit for slow starts. They had to mount comebacks in the second half. Think about the Cincinnati game where they were losing 27-6 and came back to win that game. Late comeback in the backyard brawl against West Virginia. That was not the case. They did not have to come back tonight, thanks in large part to early turnovers. 4 first-half interceptions from Kyle McCord. Griffin, I mean, what happened?
It was just consistently, all right, the first one, long throw all the way across the field, and just didn't get enough on it. It got jumped. All right, next time was shades of Julian Edelman with that catch. The linebacker just sitting down on the ground, and it lands in his hands. But then just consistently trying to make too many plays, and plays just aren't there. The screen pass at the end of the half right there. Throw that in the dirt, but instead tries to force it in there for that tight window. Ball bounces up in the air, and you're taking the 6 the other way. Just can't overcome mistakes like that.
Yeah, and there were some times, Griffin, where it seemed like McCord was trying to make something out of nothing, and as a result, like you said on a couple of plays ago, he should have just got rid of that ball, but instead he turns it over. And as you look at these bullet points here, I mean, yeah, it just was not a good offense for Syracuse in this game, Andrew, and they just really struggled to get going. And I think that McCord, give him credit. I thought that he stuck in there the whole game, and that's kind of tough to do when you're having a bad game, to stick in there and say, I'm going to play the entirety of this contest.
So that's another question that I have for you guys, and I think a lot of Syracuse fans might have for Coach Fran Brown is, was it the right move? Did you want to see Kyle McCord out there for all 30 minutes of the second half?
Well, Coach Fran Brown said, Griffin, that this is our leader, this is the guy we go to, and I think that's exactly what he showed, right? When you're struggling a little bit, when you have a little bit of adversity, how are you going to bounce back? And obviously this was a good Pittsburgh team, but Kyle McCord has that trust in Fran Brown to where he can kind of go out there and do what he needs to do. And obviously it didn't really work out.
It didn't really work out.
It didn't.
He threw 5 picks.
Okay, what do you recommend? Who's stepping up in Kyle McCord's place?
I'm not saying stepping up, but just try a different approach. And the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I know it's
you
a cliche.
live by the sword, you die by the sword. I'll throw another cliche out there.
You died by the sword tonight. That was plain and simple. You had no other chances. Just give someone else in there a different look. It doesn't have to be a quarterback controversy where it becomes this every week changing things up. Just give on someone else a different look at it.
So Fran Brown did say after the game, he said, we wanted to prove to our fans that we're going to compete for 60 minutes no matter what happened. And maybe they did that. But one thing that I think this team will be criticized now of, and he said in the postgame presser, this is Coach Brown, said, I know that this is going to be said. I don't think it is a true case, but Syracuse continues to struggle after bye weeks. Now 0-2 this season, and 2 of their last 10 have they won since 2019. This team just can't win after the bye, it feels like, Gino.
Yeah, and I talked to Justin Barron heading into this game, and I said, obviously you came out flat against Stanford. That was after the first bye this season. Is there a difference in mindset with going into this bye, going into a big game against Pittsburgh? And he said, yeah, obviously you put in a little bit more attention to detail. You watch a little bit more film because obviously you have a lot more games to play. But Griffin, I did not see any of that on the field today. It just looked like the same old Syracuse out of bye weeks.
Absolutely. I mean, talk is cheap. You saw it right away. You're down 17-0 immediately into this game, and that's came in large part due to the turnovers. But it's a theme. You were down 7-0 to start the year against Stanford. You would think this is a big game. This was a measuring stick game. Coming out and playing an undefeated Pitt team, you want to come out hot and fiery. You had the week off, ready to go. You even brought back Marlowe Wax. I mean, there's returning weapons to this team. You would have expected a hotter start, and you just straight up didn't get it from this team. A really slow evening today.
So Marlowe Wax was maybe the headliner for Syracuse returning at the linebacker spot, but instead it's a Pittsburgh linebacker that's winning our Orange Press Pass player of the game today. Rasheem Biles, he got the first pick 6 of the game. He led all players on the field with 12 tackles. It's his first career interception. He also had a sack tonight. That earns Rasheem Biles our player of the game. And boy, it had to come from that Pitt defense, because they had 5 turnovers tonight, and the Pitt defense almost outscored both offenses in this game tonight. At halftime, it was the Pitt's defense that was leading all scorers on the evening. 3 pick sixes. Biles had the first of them, took that one to the house for 6, and he wins the Player of the Game award here on Orange Press Pass. Going to take another quick break here before we return, and we'll break down everything ahead on the weekend. Big slate for college football. We'll tell you what you need to know and who might be on upset alert. ACC football gets kicked off a little early this week on a Thursday night in Pittsburgh. Andrew Selover, Gino Antimarino, Griffin, Marcy with you after Syracuse falls on a Thursday night at Acrisure Stadium. Orange have lost every game in Pittsburgh since 2001, I should say, and Syracuse loses tonight by a final score of 41-13. Let's check out what's going on in the rest of the ACC. Big weekend on tap for the conference. 4 teams still undefeated in conference play. 2 teams still undefeated on the season, and that would be Miami and Pittsburgh. Griffin, what do you have your eye on coming up later this weekend in the ACC?
To me, what calls me heading down to Blacksburg in the Battle of the Techs, Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech. 2 of the best quarterbacks in the conference, in Haynes King and Kylan Drones. And I think it'll be a good game to be a measuring stick for both of those programs. Is 2 heavy rushing attacks, and I think Georgia Tech should have a really good chance at that one on the road.
Interested to see if Haynes King is good to go health-wise as well this week. He did not play, and Zach Pyron played in his place last weekend against Notre Dame. Gino, for you in the conference.
You know, Andrew, I look at these slates, and I got to be honest with you. This strikes me as my test scores from back in the day. Mediocre. I mean, look at these records. I mean, what are we talking about here? The one game that strikes me, though, is Duke versus number 22 SMU. 17th ranked scoring defense in Duke going up against 11th ranked scoring offense in SMU. And the last time these 2 teams played against each other, Andrew, 1956. Were you around back then?
No, but welcome to the new world of the ACC, am I right?
Yeah, 14-6 win for the Blue Devils in that game. So interested to see how that game plays out.
I'd have a few more gray hairs if I was back in the day at that game in 1956. I will say big one because Pittsburgh's got SMU coming up.
That's right.
And if SMU can win that one, we've got a big one on tap soon down the road between Pitt and SMU. Let's check out the rest of the national scoreboard coming up this weekend. A number of big games, a couple of ranked games, and we'll give you some picks on some of these games. But, Gino, in the NCAA, you got Notre Dame and Navy at MetLife. That's a big game. What else sticks out?
I like the Boise State versus UNLV. Obviously, Syracuse had a little bit of experience with UNLV a few games ago. This is a defense that ranks 20th in rushing yards allowed per game with just under 105, going up against a good, obviously, Boise State rushing with Ashton Genty. So that's going to be a fun matchup to watch, Andrew.
To me, this is a big slate for the Big Ten. You have Nebraska and Ohio State, Illinois, Oregon, and also Penn State, Wisconsin. But to me, it's going to come down to Ohio State and Nebraska. I want to see how Dylan Raiola, the 5-star quarterback, one of the top recruits in the country, handles that trip over to the Horseshoe in Columbus. And then you also have Oregon, Illinois. Illinois coming off a big win against Michigan last week. See how they fare in a test against the top team in the nation in Oregon.
And Andrew, look at that. Vanderbilt against Texas. You know, one of the sayings is, if you do it once, that's luck. You got to do it again. Obviously, we know Vanderbilt beat the best team in the country in Alabama. Can they do it against the powerhouse Texas? We will have to wait and find out.
I've been told they've been putting up nets around where the Texas fans will be sitting this weekend in Nashville. Got to keep the trash off the field and protect our boy Diego Pavia and company for the Commodores. We'll get some picks on the big games. First, I want to get a couple upset picks from you guys this week. Gino, who do you got on upset alert this week?
I'm gonna say, I just talked about it. I think Vanderbilt is gonna upset Texas. That's right. I said it. My sister goes to Vanderbilt, so shout out my younger sister. She was at the game when they beat Alabama, rushed the field, got the whole experience. But, you know, Griffin, obviously this is a team that beat Alabama. They're fired up. They beat Kentucky a couple weeks ago, Ball State last week. This is also a team that's undefeated at home this season. I think that they can get it done at home against Texas.
I think you might call me crazy for my pick, and I'm going to go
If I'm going to call you crazy, I mean, I'm pretty crazy with my pick too, so I think we're in the same boat here.
I'm going with one of the biggest disasters in college football this season. They turn it around right here with Florida State heading down south to Coral Gables and beating Miami. Because when it happens is, when it's a rivalry game, all the records, the numbers, throw them out the window. It's all about the Noles. They're going to make their statement and come back to the top of college football with a win tonight.
Well, I've been told that the refs have been helping out Miami a little bit lately, so you might need to get the refs off the Canes trail here. You mind if I give you one for this weekend?
Absolutely, let's hear it.
All right, you got to watch out for Penn State. They got to go to Camp Randall and trying to beat a Wisconsin team that's won 3 straight. James Franklin's going to have to rally the troops, and I don't think he's got it. He needed overtime to beat USC, and that's not a good USC team. Let's get some big picks this week on some of the big games of the week coming up in college football. You mentioned Boise State and UNLV. This is a big one. Who do you have winning it?
I'm going to go with Boise State. Obviously, UNLV was ranked at one point a few weeks ago, but I just think Boise State, they're the real deal, and I think that they're going to come out on top. Syracuse showed that UNLV can bleed, and I think Boise State's going to take advantage of it.
I think UNLV hasn't shown that they've missed a step at all after Matt Sluka went away with his NIL issues, but you cannot stop Ashton Ginty, one of the best running backs you've seen in college football in a long time. He'll push Boise State over the edge and get them on top of this one. It'll be at least by 2 scores.
How about a Navy team that can throw the football all of a sudden with Horvath at quarterback? Right? Yeah, they can throw the ball and they're undefeated. Do they give Notre Dame trouble?
They do. But not enough trouble.
Not enough.
Because this is the first time this year that Navy will play one of the top teams in the country, and I just don't think they're quite ready to take that next step yet. It just won't happen. They'll compete probably for 3 quarters with the talent of Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, Riley Leonard. They pull away in the end.
I completely agree. I mean, Navy hasn't beaten Notre Dame. They've beat them just once in the last decade, so I just think that Notre Dame's going to get the job done against Navy.
All right, Fighting Irish are getting it done against the triple option and the passing attack from the midshipmen. We're going to take one more quick break. We'll wrap you up. We'll tell you what's coming up next for Syracuse football and how they'll try and rebound from a tough night in the Steel City. Back here on Orange Press Pass, wrapping up shop after a tough night for Syracuse football, falling at the hand of Pittsburgh 41-13. Andrew Selover, Boise State's biggest fan, Gino Antimarino, and Griffin Marcy here with you. Next up for Orange Press Pass, Syracuse football back at home for the first time in over a month. And boy, do they have work to do after coming off of this tough loss tonight, Gino.
Yeah, I mean, where does the work even start, Andrew? I thought Syracuse's defense against Pittsburgh looked pretty solid, but obviously they're going to need a lot more on offense to get the job going. As you look at the 2-team comparisons on your screen right now, a little bit too close for comfort, but Syracuse needs to get the job done against Virginia Tech.
Well, at least they get Virginia Tech at home because you want no business going down to Blacksburg and facing the Enter Sandman. So that's one bright spot. You're finally coming home after a long stretch away. But I still think Syracuse has a good chance at the rest of their season despite having a big setback today.
Orange still 1 win away from bowl eligibility. Could clinch that with a win next week at home against Virginia Tech. All right, final thoughts from the night after Syracuse loses on the road. Griffin?
To me, this one comes down to just flush it and go away. You know, you can't dwell on this. This can't turn into a big quarterback controversy because Kyle McCord went out. He threw the 5 interceptions. You can't be focused on that constantly. Just watch the film, digest it, learn from it, and just move on. Take the mess from you can, and just focus on the rest of your schedule.
I think that, listen, talk is cheap. We listened in the post-game interview with Fran Brown, and he had a lot of excuses. I don't want to see excuses. I want to see results. I don't care who's taking accountability. I want to see the Syracuse team bounce back in a big way, and I think that they can do it against Virginia Tech. They still got some big teams coming up in Boston College and also a ranked Miami team. I think that they have to figure it out and move forward. Whoever's going to take accountability, someone's going to step up.
So you seem to think that Syracuse will be able to do that. I know Fran Brown mentioned for his quarterback, Kyle McCord, everybody has a tough night, and it certainly was that for McCord. Needs to flush that. Will the Orange bounce back next week against Virginia Tech?
I think so. I trust in Coach Fran Brown, and I trust in Kyle McCord to right the ship.
Syracuse beats Virginia Tech next week.
I give it to you. They bounce back, get the job done.
All right, well, we've got two optimists. I might not be so optimistic after what you saw tonight. Syracuse looked pretty bad from the start. Defense looked okay. Offense was everything wrong with Syracuse football tonight. Orange fall 41-13 at Pitt. This has been Orange Press Pass. Thanks for joining us with Griffin, Marcy, Gino, Antimarino. I'm Andrew Selover saying good night and enjoy your college football weekend.